I found out my wife's affair meetings were at our beach house, so I hired her lover's architect wife and sent her there at meeting time. You know your marriage is circling the drain when your morning coffee costs more than your peace of mind. And honestly, at $7 a pop for a Vinny caramel latte with an extra shot, that's saying something about the state of my life right now. I was sitting in my usual corner spot at Starbucks, the one by the window where I could watch people pretend their lives were together while I pretended mine wasn't falling apart, when my phone buzzed with that familiar Nest Cam notification. Now, most people get those alerts for package deliveries or the neighbor's cat doing parkour across their porch. Me? I got front row seats to my wife's extracurricular activities, and let me tell you, the matinee showing was not rated for family viewing. There she was on my phone screen, clear as day and twice as damning. Tessa Marie West, my wife of 17 supposedly blissful years, locked in what could generously be called a business meeting with Brandon Lowell. Except this meeting involved significantly less PowerPoint and considerably more horizontal collaboration on my $8,000 sectional sofa. The same sofa I'd spent 3 weekends assembling because Tessa insisted we couldn't afford the delivery fee. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd saved $200 on delivery only to watch my marriage get delivered straight to hell, free shipping included. Let me introduce myself properly since we're going to be spending some quality time together. I'm Logan West, 46 years old, mortgage consultant at First National Bank, owner of 2 pairs of dad jeans I refuse to throw away, and according to my Nest Cam's brutal honesty, world-class fool. I've got a receding hairline that I've made peace with, a 401k that's doing better than my marriage, and apparently, the observational skills of a decorative houseplant. 17 years of marriage, folks. 17 years of anniversary dinners, couples therapy sessions we probably should have taken more seriously, and family vacations where we smiled for photos while slowly becoming strangers who shared a mortgage. The kicker? Tessa's been networking every Thursday for the last 14 months. 14 months. That's 56 Thursdays of me eating leftover Chinese food alone, thinking my wife was out there grinding for her boutique consulting business. Turns out the only thing getting ground was my trust, my dignity, and apparently, my furniture's structural integrity. She'd come home around 9, always with the same routine: kiss on my forehead, complain about traffic, something about difficult clients, and then straight to the shower. I used to think she was just dedicated to her hygiene. Now I realize she was washing away evidence like some kind of suburban Lady Macbeth, except instead of out, damned spot, it was out, damned affair partner's cologne. Brandon Lowell. Even his name sounds like it was designed by a committee of people who peaked in high school. He's a real estate agent, and I use that term loosely. With more hair gel than actual property listings, a spray tan that screams, I make poor life choices, and apparently, a complete disregard for things like morals, marriage vows, and basic human decency. I'd seen him at neighborhood barbecues, always with his wife Harper, always with that practiced smile that real estate agents perfect somewhere between their first open house and their first ethical compromise. He'd shake my hand, call me buddy, and compliment my grill technique while apparently planning to use my beach house as his personal romance novel setting. The audacity, ladies and gentlemen. The sheer, unmitigated audacity. But here's the thing about me that Tessa clearly forgot during her 14-month networking marathon. I'm not the yelling type. I'm not the guy who's going to throw his wedding ring in her face while ugly crying to a Nickelback song. No, I'm the quiet one, the methodical one, the guy who spent 22 years in finance learning that the best revenge isn't served hot or cold. It's served with spreadsheets, documentation, and the kind of calculated precision that would make an accountant weep with joy. I'm the let's take notes and ruin your life properly type. And brother, I was about to take some very detailed notes. I watched the camera feed for another 30 seconds, just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating from too much caffeine or finally having that stress-induced breakdown my doctor kept warning me about. Nope, still there, still very much happening. Tessa's laugh, the one I used to love, the one that made me propose on a beach in Maui, was echoing through my beach house, in my living room, on my couch, with someone who definitely wasn't me. The beach house we'd bought 5 years ago as an investment property and family retreat. Well, Tessa was certainly retreating there, just not with family. More like with Brandon and his commitment issues. A woman next to me ordered a pumpkin spice latte, and I wondered if she knew how good she had it. Being able to worry about seasonal beverage choices instead of whether her spouse was auditioning for an amateur production of Cheaters Gone Wild. Beach House Edition. The barista called out another order. Some teenager grabbed his frappuccino, and life just kept moving forward like my world wasn't imploding in real time through a camera I'd installed for security purposes. Well, mission accomplished on the security front, I guess. I was very secure in the knowledge that my marriage was deader than disco. I took another sip of my overpriced latte and felt something shift inside me. Not heartbreak. I'd deal with that later, probably around 2 a.m. when these things traditionally hit. No, this was something colder, sharper, more focused. This was the feeling I got when I was about to close a particularly complicated mortgage deal, when all the pieces were finally falling into place. See, Tessa thought she was smart. She thought I was the oblivious husband, too busy with interest rates and loan applications to notice her elaborate Thursday routine. She thought wrong. I pulled out my laptop, opened a new document, and titled it Project Karma. Because if there's one thing finance taught me, it's that everything comes due eventually. Every loan gets paid back, every debt gets collected, and every cheating spouse gets exactly what they deserve. I just had to figure out how to deliver that particular invoice, and I was thinking it needed to come with interest. The emotional kind that compounds daily and destroys credit ratings, reputations, and the false sense of security that comes from thinking you're getting away with something. The Nest Cam notification disappeared from my screen, but the image was burned into my brain with the permanence of a bad tattoo. Tessa and Brandon probably thought they were being clever, sneaking around like teenagers, using our own property as their personal love shack. They had no idea that I'd been watching, learning, and documenting every single Thursday for the past 3 weeks since I'd accidentally discovered this little arrangement. Revenge is a dish best served cold, they say. But I was thinking more along the lines of serving it with a side of public humiliation and a garnish of poetic justice. I finished my latte, closed my laptop, and smiled at the barista on my way out. She smiled back, probably thinking I was just another middle-aged guy having a regular Thursday morning. If only she knew. Being in finance teaches you a lot of things, but the most valuable lesson is this: follow the money, and the money will tell you exactly where the bodies are buried. Except in my case, the bodies weren't buried. They were bouncing around on my beach house furniture every Thursday afternoon while I was approving home loans for honest people who actually deserve them. Tessa's money trail looked like something straight out of a Netflix crime documentary. The kind where the spouse is always the last to know and the detectives are all shaking their heads saying, "How did he not see the signs?" Well, detective work takes time, people, and I'd been busy actually working for a living instead of playing private investigator in my own marriage. I got home that Thursday evening before Tessa did, which gave me a solid 2 hours to do what I do best: create a spreadsheet that would make forensic accountants weep with admiration. I'm talking color-coded cells, pivot tables, conditional formatting, the works. I titled it Financial Discrepancies and Marital Fraud, a Comprehensive Analysis, because if you're going to document your wife's affair, you might as well do it with proper headers and footnotes. My Excel game has always been strong, but heartbreak apparently takes it to a whole new level. Who knew emotional devastation could be such a productivity booster? I started with our joint credit card statements from the past 14 months, and let me tell you, the patterns emerged faster than Brandon probably does during his little beach house sessions. Every Thursday, like clockwork, there were charges. Wine and design classes at some upscale art studio downtown, $430 a pop. $430 to paint while drinking wine that probably cost $12 at Total Wine. The math wasn't mathing, as the kids say, unless these classes came with life coaching, therapy, and a side of delusion. I'd been to wine and paint nights before. They're usually $30, maybe $50 if you're fancy. But $430? That's not a class. That's a cover story with a receipt. Then there were the boutique hotel stays, carefully labeled in our shared calendar as client strategy weekends. Client strategy. I had to hand it to Tessa. She was creative with her terminology. These weren't cheap motels off the interstate either. No, my wife had standards when it came to infidelity. We're talking the Riverside Inn, the Harborview Suites, places with thread counts higher than my blood pressure was about to be. Each stay averaged somewhere between $400 and $600. For strategy, Strategic adultery, apparently, requires luxury accommodations and room service. But the real chef's kiss, the piece of evidence that made me laugh so hard I almost choked on my leftover General Tso's chicken, was the Uber receipts. Multiple Uber rides to our own beach house. Our beach house that's 40 minutes away, that we own, that has two perfectly functioning cars in its garage. She was taking Ubers there, which meant she didn't want her car spotted in the driveway by nosy neighbors, or, I don't know, her husband who might randomly decide to check on the property. The subtlety was truly impressive. It's like robbing a bank and then Venmo requesting the getaway driver. Just monumentally stupid in a way that's almost admirable. I cross-referenced the Uber timestamps with her calendar entries, her text messages to me about working late, and the Nest Cam footage I'd been collecting. Everything lined up with the precision of a Swiss watch. If that Swiss watch was designed to tell you exactly when your marriage turned into a joke. Every Thursday, 2:30 p.m., Uber to the beach house. Every Thursday, 3 p.m., Brandon's Lexus pulling into the driveway. Every Thursday, 8:30 p.m., Uber back home. She even tipped the drivers well, which I guess is considerate when you're using ride-sharing services to facilitate an affair. Nothing says responsible adultery like a solid 5-star Uber rating. I needed to know more about Brandon, because up until this point, he was just some guy from the neighborhood barbecues, someone I'd shared small talk with about property values and whether the HOA was ever going to fix the community pool. I pulled up his real estate website, and oh boy, it was exactly what you'd expect. Professional headshot with too much teeth, testimonials that definitely came from his relatives, and a bio that used the word passionate 4 times in 2 paragraphs. Brandon Lowell, real estate professional. More like Brandon Lowell, professional homewrecker, but I guess that doesn't look great on business cards. His sales history was public record, and let me tell you, this guy was not exactly crushing it in the real estate game. In the past 18 months, he'd closed maybe 7 properties, which in our market is basically amateur hour. He was averaging 1 sale every 2.5 months. No wonder he had so much free time for Thursday afternoon activities. He barely had a career to interfere with his hobbies. His LinkedIn was even better, endorsements for negotiation skills and client relations. Well, he'd certainly negotiated his way into my marriage and maintained excellent client relations with my wife, so I guess those endorsements weren't entirely fraudulent. Then I found her, Harper Lowell, Brandon's wife, and this is where my finance brain started connecting dots like a conspiracy theorist with a cork board and unlimited red string. Harper wasn't just any wife sitting at home oblivious to her husband's activities. No, Harper Lowell was a legitimate, successful, award-winning architect who specialized in, and I am not making this up, coastal residential properties and beach house renovations. The universe has a sense of humor, folks, and apparently, it's been taking notes from a sitcom writer's room. Her website was professional, elegant, understated, everything Brandon's wasn't. She had a portfolio that included multi-million-dollar beach houses, sustainable coastal design projects, and testimonials from actual human beings who used complete sentences and proper grammar. Harper had designed properties from here to the Outer Banks, won regional architecture awards, and taught occasional workshops at the community college. She was legitimate, accomplished, and married to a man who was currently using someone else's beach house as his personal playground. The irony was so thick you could spread it on toast. I sat there staring at Harper's professional headshot, intelligent eyes, confident smile, someone who clearly had her life together, and something clicked in my brain like a perfectly aligned Tetris piece. This wasn't just about exposing Tessa and Brandon. This wasn't about dramatic confrontations, or throwing clothes on the lawn, or changing the locks while they were mid-rendezvous. That was amateur hour. That was emotional, messy, unsatisfying. No, I wanted something more elegant, more poetic, more absolutely devastating in its simplicity. I wanted Harper Lowell, award-winning architect who specialized in beach houses, to discover her husband's affair in the most architectural way possible, by inspecting the very property where it was happening. Let karma show up with a clipboard, a laser measurer, and professional credentials. Let her find the structural damage in real time. Except the damage wasn't in the foundation of the house. It was in the foundation of 2 marriages that were about to crumble like cheap drywall. I spent the next hour researching Harper's services, her rates, her availability. She did structural inspections, renovation consultations, and property assessments. Perfect. All I needed was a legitimate reason to hire her to inspect our beach house, a carefully scheduled appointment time, and the kind of cosmic timing that separates good revenge from legendary revenge. My phone buzzed. Text from Tessa. Running late, babe. Client dinner went long. Don't wait up. Love you. I stared at those two words, love you, and felt absolutely nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just the cold, calculated satisfaction of someone who's about to execute the perfect plan. I texted back a heart emoji, because maintaining cover is important when you're about to orchestrate the most spectacular marital implosion since the invention of joint bank accounts. I saved my spreadsheet, backed it up to 3 different cloud services, and smiled at my laptop screen. Project Karma was about to enter its operational phase, and Harper Lowell, brilliant architect and unwitting accomplice, was going to be my secret weapon. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destruction, it's about construction. And I was about to build something beautiful out of the ruins of my marriage. Calling another man's wife to unknowingly help you catch that man cheating with your own wife is the kind of moral gray area they don't cover in marriage counseling. But here we are, folks, living in the future where technology and pettiness collide in beautiful harmony. I sat in my car during lunch break on Friday, a full day after discovering my wife's extracurricular activities, staring at Harper Lowell's business number on my phone screen like it was going to dial itself. My hands were sweating, which was ridiculous because I negotiate million-dollar mortgages for a living. But apparently orchestrating elaborate revenge schemes required a different skill set than explaining interest rates to first-time homebuyers. The plan was simple, elegant, and absolutely diabolical in its symmetry. Step 1. Schedule a surprise structural inspection at the beach house. Step 2. Hire Harper, Brandon's wife and legitimate architectural expert, to conduct said inspection. Step 3. Make absolutely certain her inspection time overlapped perfectly with Tessa and Brandon's weekly matinee performance. It was like coordinating a heist, except instead of stealing money, I was stealing the blissful ignorance that was currently protecting 2 cheaters from the consequences of their actions. Ocean's 11, but make it suburban and emotionally devastating. I took a deep breath, checked my reflection in the rearview mirror to make sure I looked like a respectable homeowner and not a man on the edge of a nervous breakdown, and dialed Harper's number. It rang twice before her voice came through, professional and warm. Harper Lowell Architecture. This is Harper speaking. She sounded competent, put together, like someone who had her life figured out. Little did she know, her life was about to get extremely unfigured in about 6 days. Hi, Ms. Lowell, I said, using my best client voice, the one I reserved for wealthy mortgage applicants and my mother-in-law. My name is Logan West, and I'm calling about a potential property inspection. I decided to use my real name because fake names are for amateurs and people who don't think 3 steps ahead. If this went sideways somehow, I wanted a paper trail that showed I'd legitimately hired an architect for legitimate reasons. The fact that those reasons included destroying my marriage and her husband's reputation was just, coincidental. Of course, Mr. West, Harper replied, and I could hear her shifting into business mode, probably pulling up her calendar. What kind of property are we discussing? Her voice had that pleasant efficiency that successful people cultivate, the kind that says, I'm friendly, but also my time is valuable, so let's get to the point. I respected it. I was about to ruin her Thursday, but I respected her professionalism. It's a beach house property, actually, I said, watching a seagull fight another seagull over a French fry in the parking lot. Even birds had drama. About 40 minutes from here, coastal area, we've owned it for 5 years. I'm looking to get a comprehensive structural inspection done. Foundation, walls, potential water damage, the works. It's for insurance purposes, and also we're considering some renovation work down the line. All of this was technically true, which made me feel slightly less like a villain and more like a very creative problem solver. Beach houses are actually my specialty, Harper said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Of course they were. The universe was really outdoing itself with the irony today. I'd be happy to take a look. Do you have any specific concerns about the property, or is this more of a general assessment? She was thorough, professional, asking all the right questions. Meanwhile, her husband was probably texting my wife about their next meeting, completely oblivious that his architect wife was about to conduct the most revealing inspection of her career. General assessment, I said smoothly, channeling every ounce of mortgage consultant charm I'd accumulated over 2 decades. We just want to make sure everything's structurally sound. No hidden issues. You know how it is with coastal properties. Salt, air, moisture, potential foundation problems. Better to catch things early. I was laying it on thick, but Harper seemed to be buying it. Or maybe she was just good at customer service. Either way, we were getting to the important part. Absolutely. That's very prudent, Harper agreed. Let me check my availability. When were you thinking? This was it. This was the moment where my entire plan either came together or fell apart. I needed Thursday at 3 p.m., the exact time when Tessa and Brandon would be there, but I couldn't be too specific or it would sound suspicious. I had to let Harper suggest it, or at least make her think it was a mutual decision. I'm fairly flexible, I lied. I was the opposite of flexible. I needed Thursday at 3 p.m. or this whole thing was pointless. Sooner rather than later, though. Maybe sometime next week. I held my breath, listening to her scroll through what I assumed was her calendar app. The Seagulls had resolved their French fry dispute. One flew away victorious. I was hoping for a similar outcome. I have an opening Thursday afternoon, Harper said, and I swear I heard angels singing, or maybe it was just the espresso machine at the Starbucks across the street. Would 3 p.m. work for you? It would give me enough time to do a thorough inspection before the light starts fading. Thursday, 3 p.m., the exact time Tessa usually texted me her running late message. The exact time Brandon's Lexus pulled into the driveway. The exact time my marriage conducted its weekly charade. Thursday at 3 is perfect, I said, trying to keep the excitement out of my voice. Absolutely perfect. I gave her the beach house address, which she wrote down without any reaction. Why would she react? It was just another address, another beach house, another inspection. She had no idea it was her husband's personal adultery headquarters. I almost felt bad. Almost. But then I remembered the 14 months of lies, the $430 wine classes, and the Uber receipts, and my sympathy evaporated faster than my wife's integrity. We discussed her rates, $350 for a comprehensive inspection, which was actually reasonable and way less than what Tessa was spending on her fake art classes, and she asked a few more technical questions about the property size, age, and previous renovations. I answered everything honestly because, again, I'm not actually the villain here despite how this might look. I was just a man using architecture as a weapon of truth, which when you think about it, is pretty poetic. I'll send you a confirmation email with all the details, Harper said. And Mr. West? Thank you for choosing my firm. I'll make sure to give your property a thorough evaluation. Oh, Harper, you have no idea how thorough this evaluation is going to be. You're not just going to find structural damage. You're going to find moral damage, ethical violations, and your husband in a compromising position that no amount of architectural expertise can fix. Thank you, Ms. Lowell, I said. I really appreciate your professionalism. I have a feeling this inspection is going to be very revealing. The double meaning was lost on her, but I enjoyed it anyway. We said our goodbyes, and I hung up feeling like a chess grandmaster who'd just executed a perfect opening move. The pieces were in place. The board was set. Thursday at 3 p.m., Harper Lowell would walk into my beach house expecting to inspect walls and foundations, and instead she'd discover that the real structural damage was in her marriage. I sat in my car for another few minutes, letting the reality of what I'd just set in motion wash over me. In 6 days, everything would explode. In 6 days, Tessa and Brandon's little Thursday routine would be interrupted by the one person whose presence would destroy them both. And the beautiful part? I didn't have to do anything except make sure Harper had the gate code and knew where to park. My phone buzzed. Text from Tessa. Don't forget we have that neighborhood potluck tomorrow night. Can you pick up those cookies from Costco? The good ones, not the cheap ones. Love you. I stared at the message, at those casual demands and empty affection, and typed back. Got it. See you tonight. No heart emoji this time. I was saving my hearts for Thursday, when Harper walked through that door and discovered exactly what kind of man she'd married, and exactly what kind of woman I'd been married to. The Seagulls were back, fighting over a new prize. I watched them for a moment, then started my car and headed back to work. I had mortgages to approve, clients to call, and a completely normal life to maintain for 6 more days while my master plan counted down like a bomb with a very specific timer. Thursday at 3 p.m. The inspection of a lifetime. I couldn't wait. Thursday arrived with the kind of perfect weather that makes you believe in divine intervention or at least cosmic comedy. Clear blue skies, temperature in the mid-70s, light breeze coming off the ocean. It was the kind of day that belonged in a romantic movie montage, not a suburban revenge thriller. But here we are, folks, because the universe apparently decided that my wife's affair deserved premium production value. I'd taken a personal day from work, told my boss I had family matters to attend to, which was technically true if by family matters you mean watching my marriage implode via high-definition security camera while parked across the street like a divorced dad in a crime procedural. I'd positioned myself at 2:15 p.m., a full 30 minutes before showtime, because preparation is everything and also because I'm the kind of person who arrives at the airport 3 hours early even for domestic flights. My car was parked on the opposite side of the street, 3 houses down, with a perfect view of the beach house driveway, but far enough away that I wouldn't be immediately obvious to anyone pulling in. I'd brought supplies, laptop fully charged and connected to the Nest Cam feed, a Vinny Dark roast from Starbucks, because if you're going to watch your marriage and you might as well be caffeinated, a pack of trail mix I wasn't going to eat because my stomach was doing gymnastics, and the emotional stability of a man about to live stream his own heartbreak for an audience of one. The neighborhood was quiet, almost eerily so. Mrs. Patterson from number 42 was walking her golden retriever, completely oblivious that she was strolling past ground zero of what was about to become the most talked about scandal in our community since the HOA president got caught embezzling dues to fund his cryptocurrency addiction. A jogger passed by, earbuds in, probably listening to a motivational podcast about crushing your goals. My goal was to crush my wife's affair with surgical precision, so I guess we were both being productive with our Thursday afternoon. At 2:47 p.m., my heart rate picked up. I could see it on my fitness tracker, resting rate of 70 suddenly jumping to 95. My Apple Watch asked if I was working out. No, Apple Watch, I'm working through trauma. There's a difference. I refreshed my laptop screen even though the feed was live and continuous. The beach house looked peaceful, innocent even, with its gray shingles and white trim and absolutely no indication that it was about to become the setting for a marriage-ending confrontation that would make reality TV producers weep with envy. 2:49 p.m. Tessa's black BMW turned onto the street, and I felt my chest tighten like someone had wrapped it in plastic wrap. There she was, my wife of 17 years, driving to our beach house for her weekly appointment with infidelity. She looked completely normal through the windshield, sunglasses on, probably singing along to whatever was on her playlist, totally relaxed and comfortable in her routine of deception. She'd texted me an hour ago. Busy day, babe. Client meeting this afternoon. Might run late. Love you. The casualness of the lie was almost impressive. She'd had 14 months to perfect it, I suppose. She pulled into the driveway, parked, and sat in her car for a moment checking her phone. Probably texting Brandon their coordination details, or maybe just scrolling Instagram like a normal person about to do deeply abnormal things. She got out wearing jeans and a blue blouse. Casual Thursday afternoon attire for someone who wasn't about to get caught in an affair by her lover's wife, who happened to be an award-winning architect. She looked pretty, put together, like someone heading to an actual business meeting. The performance was flawless. I'd almost believe it myself if I hadn't seen the last 14 months of receipts. 2:57 p.m. Brandon's silver Lexus appeared like clockwork, because if nothing else, these two were punctual about their betrayal. I had to give them credit for time management. He parked behind Tessa's BMW, and I watched him emerge looking like every mid-level real estate agent you've ever seen. Khaki pants, polo shirt, aviator sunglasses that probably cost more than his last commission check. He glanced around the street, probably checking for witnesses, which was adorable considering he was being recorded in 1080p high definition. Amateur hour, buddy. Absolute amateur hour. He walked up to the door with the confidence of a man who thought he was getting away with something, which technically he had been for over a year, so I couldn't blame him for the swagger. Tessa opened the door before he could knock. She'd been watching for him, clearly, and they disappeared inside together. The door closed. 3 p.m. exactly. They were nothing if not consistent. I switched my laptop to the interior camera feed. There they were, in my living room. And I'm not going to describe what happened next because some things you can't unsee, and also because this is already depressing enough without the play-by-play. Let's just say they wasted no time with small talk or pretense. Straight to business, these two. Very efficient. I took a sip of my coffee, which had gone lukewarm, and waited. The main event was about to arrive. 3:08 p.m. A white Toyota Camry turned onto the street. Harper. I recognized her from her website photos. Professional, composed, carrying a leather messenger bag that probably contained architectural tools and the kind of organizational systems that successful people use. She drove slowly, checking house numbers, clearly looking for the right address. My address. The address I'd given her 6 days ago when I'd hired her to inspect a property that her husband was currently defiling. She parked on the street in front of the house at 3:11 p.m. And I watched her sit there for a moment, probably reviewing her inspection checklist or whatever architects review before they walk into what they think is a routine job. She had no idea. Absolutely no idea. She got out of her car looking every bit the professional she was. Slacks, blazer, sensible shoes for walking around a property, hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She grabbed her bag, pulled out what looked like a tablet, and checked something on the screen. 3:12 p.m. Harper walked up to the front door and rang the doorbell. I heard it through the camera feed's audio, a cheerful ding-dong that sounded absurdly normal given what was about to happen. On my screen, I could see Tessa and Brandon freeze like deer in headlights, or more accurately, like cheaters in doorbell lights. There was a moment of pure panic on both their faces. Who could be at the door? They weren't expecting anyone. This was their private Thursday afternoon. Their safe space. Their secret. Brandon said something I couldn't quite hear through the audio, probably some version of "who the hell is that?" Tessa looked terrified, scrambling to make herself presentable, which was hilarious considering how unpresentable the situation was. Brandon grabbed his shirt from wherever he'd thrown it. I wasn't looking too closely because, again, some things you can't unsee, and headed toward the stairs, probably planning to hide upstairs until whoever was at the door went away. Harper rang the doorbell again. Professional persistence. She had an appointment, after all. A legitimate, scheduled, paid-for appointment to inspect this property. Tessa finally composed herself enough to walk toward the door, probably planning to get rid of whoever it was as quickly as possible. She smoothed her hair, adjusted her blouse, and opened the door with a confused smile. "Hi, can I help you?" I heard Tessa say through the camera audio, her voice doing that fake pleasant thing people do when they're annoyed but trying to hide it. "Hi there," Harper replied, professional and warm. "I'm Harper Lowell. I have a 3 p.m. appointment with the homeowner for a structural inspection." She checked her tablet. "This is 847 Coastal Drive, correct?" I watched Tessa's face go through about 17 different emotions in 3 seconds. Confusion. Recognition of the name Lowell. Growing horror. The slow, dawning realization that something was very, very wrong. "I'm sorry," Tessa stammered. "There must be some mistake." "No mistake," Harper said, still professional, still clueless. "Mr. Logan West hired me to conduct a comprehensive property inspection today at 3 p.m. Is he here?" The mention of my name, my full name, landing like a bomb in the middle of Tessa's Thursday afternoon affair was so beautiful I almost laughed into my now-cold latte. I didn't, though, because the show was just getting started and I needed to see how this played out. Tessa was visibly panicking now, trying to figure out how to handle this situation without revealing why she was at our beach house during her supposed client meeting hours. And that's when Brandon, shirtless and apparently lacking any survival instincts whatsoever, appeared at the top of the stairs visible through the open door, calling down. "Tessa, who is it?" Harper's head turned. Her eyes traveled up the stairs. And even from across the street, through a laptop screen, watching a camera feed, I could see the exact moment Harper Lowell's world tilted off its axis. The stage was set. The players were in position. And the show was about to get really, really interesting. If you've never watched someone's entire reality crumble in real time through a security camera feed while sitting in your car drinking cold coffee, let me tell you, it's simultaneously the most satisfying and most uncomfortable experience you can have. Harper Lowell stood in my doorway, professional messenger bag in hand, tablet at the ready, staring up at her half-naked husband who was standing in someone else's beach house at 3 in the afternoon on a Thursday, looking like he'd just been caught stealing from the cookie jar. Except the cookie jar was my marriage, and he'd been stealing from it for 14 months straight. The silence that followed Brandon's appearance lasted maybe 4 seconds, but those 4 seconds felt like an entire geological era. I'm talking Ice Age to modern civilization levels of time dilation. Harper's face went through a transformation that was absolutely mesmerizing to watch. Professional confusion melting into recognition, recognition crystallizing into understanding, and understanding exploding into something that looked like the emotional equivalent of a controlled demolition. Her architect brain was probably doing rapid calculations, measuring angles and distances and the structural integrity of her marriage, and finding that everything was failing inspection. Brandon. Harper's voice came through the camera audio, and it was the kind of quiet that's more terrifying than screaming. It was the quiet before an earthquake, before a tsunami, before your entire world gets rearranged by forces you didn't see coming. She said his name like she was testing whether he was real, whether this was actually happening, whether the universe had really set up this particular cosmic joke at her expense. Brandon, to his credit or maybe his complete lack of credit, froze like a mannequin someone had posed in the worst possible location. He was shirtless, which is already not a great look when your wife discovers you somewhere unexpected, but he was shirtless in that specific just got caught doing something you shouldn't way that's impossible to explain away. His mouth opened and closed like a fish that had just realized it was no longer in water, and his brain was clearly blue screening, trying to load an explanation that didn't exist in any reality where physics and logic still applied. Tessa, standing at the door between Harper and her own destruction, looked like she wanted the earth to open up and swallow her whole. Her face had gone from healthy California tan to the color of uncooked bread dough, and I could see her hands shaking even through the camera feed. She was trapped between her lover's wife and her lover, between the lie she'd been living and the truth that was about to tear through it like a wrecking ball through drywall. Harper, Brandon finally managed to say, and his voice cracked on the second syllable like a teenage boy going through puberty. What are you? I can explain. This isn't. He was cycling through the opening lines of various excuses, trying to find one that might possibly work, not realizing that there are no excuses in the English language or any other language that explain why you're half naked in someone else's beach house at 3 p.m. on a Thursday when your wife shows up for a scheduled appointment. Harper walked into the house, just walked right in, past Tessa, who couldn't have stopped her if she'd wanted to, moving with the kind of purposeful stride that suggested she was done being confused and had moved directly into investigation mode. She kept her eyes on Brandon, who was still frozen at the top of the stairs like a deer in headlights if that deer had made consistently terrible life choices and was now facing the consequences. I have an appointment, Harper said, her voice steady and cold as January. A structural inspection. For Logan West, the homeowner. She pronounced each word carefully, like she was presenting evidence in court, which in a way, she was. He hired me to inspect this property. His property. At 3 p.m. today, which is now. She checked her watch with theatrical precision. 3:14 p.m., to be exact. I was watching this unfold on my laptop screen, and I'm not proud to admit this, but I was grinning like an idiot. This was better than I'd imagined. This was performance art. This was justice with a clipboard and professional credentials. Harper had turned her unexpected discovery into an inspection of a different kind, not of walls and foundations, but of trust and fidelity and the structural integrity of her marriage. Harper, please, let me. Brandon started coming down the stairs, apparently deciding that being closer to his wife while shirtless was somehow better than being far away from his wife while shirtless. It wasn't. It really, really wasn't. He looked like he was walking toward his own execution, and in a way, he was. The execution of his marriage, his reputation, his comfortable lie of a life. Where's your shirt, Brandon? Harper asked, and the question was so calm, so clinical, that it was more devastating than any screaming could have been. She wasn't asking because she didn't know. She was asking because she wanted to hear him try to explain it. She wanted to watch him squirm. I respected the hell out of that approach. Harper Lowell was not a woman who lost her composure, apparently. She was a woman who weaponized her composure. Tessa, finally finding her voice. jumped in with what might be the most idiotic attempt at explanation I've ever heard. We had a business meeting, and it got warm, and she trailed off because even she could hear how absolutely ridiculous that sounded. A business meeting that required shirt removal at a beach house that neither of them owned, that one of their spouses had hired the other's spouse to inspect. Sure, Tessa. Totally normal business protocol. Harper turned to look at Tessa for the first time, really look at her, and I saw a recognition dawn on her face. "You're Logan's wife," Harper said, and it wasn't a question. She'd probably seen photos at neighborhood events, or maybe Brandon had pointed Tessa out at some HOA meeting. Tessa West. The way she said the name made it sound like evidence being logged into record. "I can explain," Tessa whispered, which was hilarious because she absolutely could not explain. There is no explanation for this. None. Zero. You can't explain away 14 months of Thursday afternoon affairs just because you finally got caught. "I think I've found the crack in the foundation," Harper said, and her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. She was still standing there with her professional bag and her tablet, still technically on the job, but the job had shifted from inspecting property to inspecting the ruins of two marriages. She looked from Tessa to Brandon and back again. Her architect's eye probably measuring distances and angles and calculating exactly how long this had been going on based on the comfort level they displayed before being interrupted. Brandon finally made it down the stairs. Shirt somehow materialized back onto his body, though not properly buttoned, and he reached out toward Harper like he was going to touch her arm. She stepped back so fast he might as well have been radioactive. "Don't," she said, and that single word carried more weight than a 1,000-page divorce filing. "Don't touch me. Don't speak to me. Don't." Her voice finally cracked, just slightly, just enough to show that underneath the professional armor, there was a human being whose heart was breaking in real time. I sat in my car watching this unfold, and I felt something weird in my chest. Not satisfaction exactly. Not quite sadness either. Maybe it was recognition. The recognition that Harper and I were in the same boat now. Both of us betrayed by people we trusted, both of us having our lives rearranged without our consent. She was handling it better than I probably would have if I'd walked in instead of watching from a safe distance. She had grace under pressure. Poison crisis. Meanwhile, I was sitting in my car with cold coffee and emotional damage. Harper pulled out her phone, and for a moment I thought she might call the police or maybe a lawyer, but instead she just started taking photos. Of the room. Of Brandon. Of Tessa. Documenting everything with the thoroughness of someone who understood that evidence matters, that documentation is everything, that you need receipts when you're about to blow up your life and rebuild it from scratch. "I'm leaving," Harper announced, still calm, still controlled. "I'm going to my car. I'm going to drive away. And when I get home, Brandon, I want you to think very carefully about what you're going to say to me, because whatever comes out of your mouth needs to be the truth. The whole truth. How long, how many times, and why." She looked at Tessa. "You should probably call your husband. Tell him his inspection is complete. I found significant structural damage. Catastrophic, actually. The kind that can't be repaired." And with that, Harper Lowell, award-winning architect and newly minted member of the Betrayed Spouses Club, walked out of my beach house with her head high and her dignity intact, leaving behind two people who looked like they'd just survived a natural disaster but hadn't quite processed the extent of the damage yet. I watched her get in her car, sit there for a moment with her head on the steering wheel, and then drive away. My phone buzzed. Text from Harper. "We need to talk." "Coffee." I texted back. "Absolutely." "When?" "Now." I started my car and followed her direction to the nearest cafe, leaving Tessa and Brandon to deal with the wreckage of their Thursday afternoon. The show was over, but the real work was just beginning. The cafe Harper chose was one of those aggressively hipster places where the baristas have tattoos of literary quotes and the coffee costs more than a tank of gas. But honestly, after watching your spouse's affair implode in real time, you're not really in a position to be picky about ambience. I walked in 10 minutes after Harper's text, scanning the room until I spotted her in a corner booth, sitting with the kind of rigid posture that suggested she was holding herself together through sheer force of will and possibly spite. She'd ordered already. There were 2 cups on the table, which meant she'd either predicted I'd want coffee or she needed 2 cups for herself, and honestly, both options were valid. I slid into the booth across from her, and we just looked at each other for a moment. Two strangers who'd become unwilling members of the same terrible club. The Betrayed Spouses Association, unofficial chapter of people whose partners couldn't keep it in their pants. We should get jackets. Maybe a newsletter. I opened my mouth to say something. What? I don't know. Maybe thanks for coming or sorry about your marriage. But Harper beat me to it. So, Mr. West, she said, and her voice was eerily calm. The kind of calm that comes before an emotional nuclear strike or a really devastating Yelp review. How long have you known? She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup like she was trying to absorb its warmth, or maybe just trying to keep her hands occupied so she wouldn't throw something. Her eyes were dry, sharp, focused. This was a woman who'd spent the last 15 minutes processing betrayal at the speed of light and had emerged on the other side with questions and a game plan. 14 months, I said, watching her face for a reaction. Give or take. I found out about 3 weeks ago, but the affair itself has been going on for 14 months. Every Thursday. Like clockwork. Very punctual betrayal, if nothing else. I took a sip of the coffee she'd ordered for me. Black, no sugar, which was either a lucky guess or she'd somehow intuited that I was the kind of person who took his coffee as bitter as his current emotional state. You? I asked, even though I knew the answer. We both knew the answer. She'd found out approximately 45 minutes ago when her husband appeared shirtless in a beach house he had no business being in, with a woman he definitely had business not doing business with. About 14 minutes, Harper said, and she laughed, except it wasn't a real laugh. It was the kind of sound people make when the alternative is screaming or crying or driving their car into the ocean. Well, technically I've known for 42 minutes, but who's counting? Oh wait, I am. I'm counting everything now. Every late night at the office, every weekend showing that ran long, every time he said he was networking. Turns out he was networking just horizontally, with your wife, in your beach house, on what I assume is very expensive furniture. $8,000 sectional, I confirmed. Took me 3 weekends to assemble because Tessa said we couldn't afford the delivery fee. The irony is not lost on me. I pulled out my phone, pulled up the spreadsheet I'd been maintaining like it was my second full-time job. I have documentation. A lot of it. Receipts, timestamps, Uber records, credit card statements going back 14 months. I'm in finance, so I'm very good at following money trails, and Tessa's money trail has been screaming affair louder than a car alarm at 3 a.m. Harper leaned forward, and for the first time since I'd walked in, I saw something other than shock in her eyes. I saw interest. Professional interest. The same look she probably got when examining a particularly challenging architectural problem. Show me, she said. Not a request. A demand. This woman was done being passive. Done being the person things happened to. She was ready to be the person who made things happen, and I respected the hell out of that energy. I turned my laptop around, walking her through the spreadsheet of doom. Column A, dates. Column B, Tessa's calendar entries, all labeled things like client strategy session and networking event. Column C, actual expenses cross-referenced with our joint credit card. Column D, Uber receipts to and from the beach house. Column E, timestamps from the Nest Cam showing arrivals and departures. It was color-coded. It had graphs. It had pivot tables. It was the kind of spreadsheet that would make an accountant weep with joy and a cheating spouse weep with recognition that they'd been caught by someone with way too much time and Microsoft Excel proficiency. Harper studied it like she was reading blueprints, her finger tracing down the columns, her architect brain probably cataloging and organizing information with the same precision she used for building designs. Wine and design classes, she read aloud. $430 each. That's not a class. That's a cover story with a luxury price tag. She scrolled further. Boutique hotels. The Riverside Inn. I know that place. Brandon and I stayed there for our anniversary 3 years ago. He took your wife there. He has a type. I offered, trying for dark humor and not quite landing it. Apparently that type is married women in beach houses. Harper didn't laugh, but her mouth twitched like she appreciated the attempt. She kept scrolling through my evidence, and I could see her mental wheels turning, processing, calculating. I have my own documentation now, Harper said, pulling out her tablet and opening it to reveal photos she'd taken at the beach house. Brandon, shirtless and panicked. Tessa, looking like she wanted to disappear into the floorboards. Wide shots of the living room, establishing context and location. Timestamps on every photo. I took these the second I realized what was happening. Evidence. Because in about 3 hours, when the shock wears off and Brandon tries to gaslight me about what I saw, I'll have proof that my eyes and my memory are working just fine. A barista called out someone's order, a caramel macchiato with extra whip, and the normalcy of it felt surreal. Here we were, two people whose lives had just been dynamically rearranged by infidelity, sitting in a hipster cafe surrounded by people worrying about normal things like whether their coffee had enough foam or if they should get the avocado toast. Meanwhile, we were comparing notes on our spouse's affair like we were collaborating on a true crime podcast. I also have these, Harper said, opening another folder on her tablet. My architectural notes from today's inspection. She turned the screen toward me, and I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. There, in professional architectural terminology, were notes like severe structural damage detected in master bedroom area, foundation compromised by repeated stress and poor judgment, and my personal favorite, load-bearing truss columns have experienced catastrophic failure. Recommend complete demolition and rebuild. You're amazing, I said, and I meant it. This woman had discovered her husband's affair less than an hour ago and had already weaponized her professional expertise into documentation that was both technically accurate and emotionally devastating. That's the most beautiful thing I've ever read, and I approve mortgages for a living, so I've read a lot of technical documents. I figured if I'm going to have the worst day of my life, I might as well make it productive, Harper said. She took a long drink of her coffee, and when she put the cup down, her hands were steadier. Here's what I know. Brandon has been cheating on me for at least 14 months, possibly longer. Your wife has been his partner in this. They've been using your property, your furniture, and apparently your Netflix account because I saw the TV was on when I walked in. They thought they were being clever. They thought they'd never get caught. They were wrong, I said. Catastrophically wrong. Because they didn't count on me being petty enough to install cameras, paranoid enough to check receipts, and creative enough to hire you to inspect the very property where they were conducting their affair. And they definitely didn't count on you being professional enough to show up exactly on time for an appointment and composed enough to document everything when you found them. We make a good team, Harper observed, and there was something almost warm in her voice now. Not happy. We were both too freshly wounded for happy, but something like recognition. Like finding out you're not alone in the terrible thing that's happening to you. Like discovering that someone else understands the specific brand of betrayal you're experiencing. Two betrayed people in a caffeine-fueled support group. We should probably have membership cards. I was thinking jackets, I said. Maybe a secret handshake. This time Harper did smile. Just a little. Just enough to remind me that underneath the shock and pain and professional composure, there was a human being trying to process an impossible situation with grace and dark humor. We sat there for another moment, two strangers united by infidelity and really good coffee, and I realized something. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. We'd exposed the affair, sure. We'd caught them in the act. But exposure wasn't enough. Catching them wasn't enough. We both knew, though neither of us had said it yet, that this was just the beginning. So, Harper said, finishing her coffee and looking at me with eyes that had gone from shock to calculating. What's next? I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who'd been documenting and planning for 3 weeks and was ready to move from reconnaissance to execution. Now, I said, it gets fun. Revenge, I've learned, is best served family style with a side of mashed potatoes and the kind of social pressure that makes people squirm in their seats like they're sitting on hot coals disguised as dining chairs. Harper and I spent the next 3 days planning what can only be described as the most passive-aggressive dinner party in suburban history. And let me tell you, coordinating a social ambush requires the same attention to detail as planning a wedding, except instead of celebrating love, we were celebrating the imminent destruction of 2 affairs and possibly 4 lives, depending on how you count collateral damage. The concept was simple but beautiful in its cruelty. Throw a small dinner party to celebrate Tessa's supposed business milestone, some made-up achievement I invented about her consulting firm landing a major client, which was hilarious considering her only real client was Brandon and he wasn't paying her in anything except lies and broken vows. I'd invite the usual suspects from our social circle. People who loved nothing more than a good scandal and had the social media reach to make sure everyone within a 50-mile radius would know about it by Sunday brunch. And the piece de resistance? Brandon and Harper would be invited as guests, except only Harper would know what was actually happening. Brandon would walk into his own execution thinking it was just another neighborhood dinner party. I floated the idea to Tessa on Friday evening, casual as hell, like I was suggesting we order pizza instead of orchestrating her public humiliation. Hey babe, I was thinking we should have people over next week. Celebrate your big client win. You know, the consulting deal you've been working so hard on. I watched her face carefully, looking for any sign that she realized I was full of it, but Tessa was so deep in her own lies that she couldn't recognize someone else's. Oh, she said, and I could see her brain scrambling to figure out which fake business achievement I was referring to. She'd told so many lies over the past 14 months that she'd lost track of her own cover stories. Right? Yes, that would be nice. Nothing too big, though. There was hope in her voice, the hope of someone who wanted to keep her social circles small and separate, the better to maintain her double life. Small and intimate, I assured her, already mentally drafting the guest list that would be anything but small and definitely not intimate in the way she was hoping. Just neighbors, maybe some of your work friends, couple of people from my office. Keep it around 15, 20 people max. 20 people was the perfect number, large enough to create an audience, small enough that everyone would be close enough to hear every devastating word. Tessa actually smiled, relieved. That sounds perfect. When were you thinking? She was using her sweet voice, the one she used when she was happy with me, when I was being the supportive husband who made her life easier. Little did she know I was about to make her life significantly more complicated. Next Saturday gives us a week to plan. Next Saturday was 10 days after the beach house incident, long enough that Brandon and Harper would theoretically have had time to work things out. If they were going to, short enough that the wounds would still be fresh and everyone would be operating on raw nerves and terrible judgment. Perfect conditions for a social disaster. I'll send out invites, Tessa offered, and I had to stop myself from laughing. Should we invite Brandon and Harper? They're always fun at parties. The absolute irony of my wife suggesting we invite her affair partner and his betrayed spouse to a dinner party was so thick I could have spread it on bread. She had no idea Harper knew. No idea that I knew. She was walking around thinking she was still getting away with it, that the beach house incident had somehow stayed contained, that her Thursday afternoon activities were still secret. Absolutely, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Make sure you tell them to dress nice. It's a celebration, after all. I texted Harper immediately after. Tessa just invited you and Brandon to the dinner party. She has no idea you know. This is going to be incredible. Harper's response came back within seconds. I wouldn't miss it for the world. What should I bring? Besides evidence and moral superiority. I was really starting to like this woman. She had the kind of dark humor that only comes from being recently betrayed and deciding that if you're going to suffer, you might as well do it with style. The guest list came together beautifully, like a symphony of nosy people and gossip enthusiasts. There was Margaret and Tom from 3 houses down, who ran the neighborhood watch and knew everyone's business before the people themselves did. Richard from my office, who couldn't keep a secret if his life depended on it, and had a social media following that included half the mortgage professionals in the state. Tessa's friend Jennifer, who claimed to hate drama but always somehow ended up in the middle of it with a glass of wine and her phone recording. My college buddy Mike and his wife Sarah, who'd been through their own marital issues and would absolutely recognize the signs of what was about to happen. And of course, Brandon and Harper Lowell, the guests of honor who didn't know they were guests of honor. I spent the week playing the perfect husband, asking Tessa about menu options and whether we should hire a caterer or do it ourselves. We went with catering because I needed to focus on orchestration, not food preparation. I ordered from that upscale place downtown that does the fancy small plates, the kind of food that's more art than sustenance but photographs well for the inevitable social media posts. I bought new wine glasses, good wine, better whiskey. If we were going to blow up 2 marriages, we were going to do it with class. Harper and I texted constantly throughout the week, coordinating our approach like generals planning a military campaign. She'd arrived separately from Brandon, claimed they'd had scheduling conflicts. She'd bring copies of the photos from the beach house, printed and ready to distribute like the world's worst party favors. I'd have my spreadsheet ready on my laptop, because nothing says your marriage is over like color-coded financial evidence of infidelity. We were prepared, focused, and running on spite and cold brew coffee. Tessa spent the week in blissful ignorance. Picking out decorations and agonizing over the playlist like this was actually a celebration and not an ambush. She bought a new dress for the occasion. White, naturally, because the universe has a sense of irony, and got her hair done on Friday. She was excited, genuinely excited, to host this party. She kept saying things like, "This is going to be so fun," and "I can't wait for everyone to be together." And I had to bite my tongue every single time to keep from laughing or crying or both. Brandon, according to Harper's reports, was stressed. He'd apparently spent the week trying to explain away the beach house incident with increasingly ridiculous stories. First it was, "I was checking on a property for a client." Then it became, "I was meeting a client and things got weird." Finally he'd landed on, "It was a misunderstanding and I can explain everything." Which is what guilty people say when they absolutely cannot explain everything. Harper had played it cool, told him they'd discuss it at therapy or after the dinner party, whatever came first. She was giving him just enough rope to hang himself with, and he was taking it eagerly. Saturday arrived with perfect weather, mid-60s, clear skies, the kind of evening that belonged in a lifestyle magazine spread about successful suburban living. I spent the afternoon setting up, arranging chairs, making sure the catering was on schedule, testing the sound system I'd rented for the occasion. Yes, I'd rented a sound system for a dinner party. When you're planning to publicly expose an affair, you want to make sure everyone can hear. At 6 p.m., guests started arriving. Margaret and Tom came first, armed with a bottle of wine and enough curiosity to power a small investigation. Richard showed up with his wife, both of them dressed like they were attending a wedding instead of a dinner party, which was appropriate given that they were actually attending two marriage funerals. Jennifer arrived alone, already on her second glass of wine from pre-gaming, her phone charged and ready to document whatever she sensed was about to happen. At 6:47 p.m., Brandon's Lexus pulled up. He got out alone, looking nervous, checking his phone repeatedly like he was expecting a last-minute pardon from the governor. He was wearing a blazer and jeans, the real estate agent's uniform, and his hair had so much product in it that it could probably survive a Category 5 hurricane. He walked up to the door with the expression of a man heading to his own execution, but hoping maybe it was just a friendly barbecue. At 6:52 p.m., Harper's Camry appeared. She parked, sat in her car for a moment collecting herself, and then emerged looking like she'd stepped out of a magazine spread about powerful women who don't take shit from anyone. Black dress, perfect hair, heels that could double as weapons, and a smile that would make a shark nervous. She caught my eye as she walked up, gave me the tiniest nod, and I knew. We were ready. Tessa greeted everyone at the door, playing the perfect hostess in her white dress and gilt. She hugged Harper like they were friends, completely oblivious that Harper knew exactly what she'd been doing every Thursday for over a year. She waved at Brandon like he was just another neighbor, not the man she'd been systematically betraying her marriage with in coastal real estate. By 7 p.m., everyone was here, drinks were flowing, and the energy in the room felt like the moment before a storm breaks. Harper looked at me across the room. I nodded. It was showtime. Dinner started with the kind of polite small talk that makes you wonder if humans actually evolved to communicate or just to fill awkward silences with observations about the weather and compliments about casserole dishes nobody really cares about. Margaret was going on about the new stop sign the HOA finally approved after 18 months of debate, which apparently was the most exciting thing to happen in our neighborhood since someone's teenager egged the mailboxes last Halloween. Richard was explaining mortgage rate fluctuations to anyone who'd listen, which was nobody, but that didn't stop him because finance people are legally required to talk about interest rates at social gatherings. Tessa was in full hostess mode, making sure everyone had drinks and appetizers, playing her role so perfectly that I almost felt bad about what was coming. Almost. Brandon sat at the far end of the table looking like a man who'd accidentally shown up to his own surprise intervention, checking his phone every 30 seconds and doing that thing where you laugh at jokes a half-second too late because you're not actually listening to the conversation. Harper sat across from him, serene and composed, sipping her wine with the kind of calm that comes right before you execute a plan that's going to ruin several people's evening and possibly their entire lives. She caught my eye once during the salad course, Caesar salad that nobody was eating because people don't actually eat at dinner parties. They just push food around their plates while judging everyone else's life choices, and gave me a look that said, "Ready when you are." I was ready. I'd been ready since Thursday when I watched my marriage implode via security camera. I'd been ready since I discovered 14 months of receipts and lies and Uber rides to my own property. Hell, I'd probably been ready since the first time Tessa came home from a networking event, smelling like cologne that wasn't mine, and I believed her story about hugging a client goodbye. But timing is everything in revenge, just like in comedy, and I needed to wait for the perfect moment when everyone was relaxed enough to be shocked, but not drunk enough to miss the details. That moment came during the main course, some kind of herb-crusted salmon situation with roasted vegetables that looked like they belonged on a cooking show, when Jennifer, already 3 wines deep and operating with zero social filter, said something that handed me the perfect opening on a silver platter. "Tessa, this is lovely, but what are we actually celebrating? You've been so mysterious about this big client deal." Jennifer was grinning like she'd asked an innocent question, but I knew better. Jennifer could smell drama the way sharks smell blood in the water, and she'd been circling all evening waiting for something interesting to happen. Tessa laughed, that practiced laugh she'd perfected over 17 years of marriage, and started to launch into some fabricated story about consulting contracts and business development. But before she could get 3 words out, Harper set down her wine glass with just enough force to make it click against the table, and suddenly every eye in the room was on her, because people have a sixth sense for when shit's about to get interesting. "Tessa," Harper said, and her voice was smooth as butter and sharp as a knife, "I'm curious about something. How's the beach house renovation going? You and Brandon have been spending so much time there together. I figured you must be making real progress on the property." The words hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled, and I watched Tessa's face go through about 15 different expressions in 2 seconds flat. Confusion gave way to panic. Panic gave way to forced casual smile, and forced casual smile gave way to the slow, dawning horror of someone realizing they've just been called out at a dinner party with 20 witnesses. Brandon dropped his fork, literally dropped it onto his plate with a clatter that sounded like a gunshot in the suddenly silent room. Margaret leaned forward like she was watching the season finale of her favorite show. Richard stopped talking about mortgage rates mid-sentence, which might have been the first time in recorded history that had ever happened. Jennifer pulled out her phone so fast I'm surprised she didn't get whiplash. "I don't." "What are you?" Tessa stammered, and I almost felt bad for her except I didn't because she'd been lying to me for over a year and I'd spent 3 weeks planning this exact moment. She looked at me for help, those big eyes that used to make me want to protect her now, just making me want to laugh at the audacity of thinking I was going to save her from consequences she'd spent 14 months earning. I decided it was my turn to contribute to the conversation, so I leaned back in my chair with the kind of casual energy that suggested I was just making normal dinner party small talk and not detonating 2 marriages in front of an audience. "Yeah, babe," I said, letting that last word drip with sarcasm thick enough to spread on toast. "Tell everyone about the beach house project. You and Brandon have been working on it every Thursday for what, 14 months now. That's dedication. Real commitment to the renovation process. Very hands-on approach." I took a sip of my wine, enjoying the way Tessa's face had gone from sun-kissed tan to the color of old mayonnaise. "Logan, this isn't. You're misunderstanding." Tessa tried, but her voice was shaking and everyone at the table could hear it. Everyone could see it. This wasn't a misunderstanding, and we all knew it. This was the main event, the moment they'd all sensed was coming since the salad course, and nobody was leaving until they got the full show. Harper pulled out a manila envelope from her purse with the theatrical timing of a lawyer in a courtroom drama, and I loved her a little bit in that moment for being so perfectly, devastatingly prepared. "I have photos," Harper announced to the room, her voice clear and steady. "From last Thursday, when I was hired, by Logan, actually, to conduct a structural inspection of his beach house at 3 p.m. Imagine my surprise when I showed up to find my husband there. Shirtless." She paused, letting that word land like a bomb. "With Tessa, also in various states of undress, on what I'm told is a very expensive sectional sofa. $8,000, I confirmed helpfully. Took 3 weekends to assemble. The room exploded. Not literally, but close. Margaret gasped so loud it probably registered on the Richter scale. Tom grabbed his wife's arm like he needed physical support to process what he was hearing. Richard's mouth fell open and stayed that way, and Sarah pulled out her phone to join Jennifer in what was rapidly becoming a live documentation of the social event of the decade. Mike just stared at me with an expression that clearly said, "Dude, you're my hero," mixed with, "I'm so glad this isn't happening to me." Harper started pulling photos out of the envelope, laying them on the table like she was dealing cards in the world's worst poker game. The next morning, I woke up to 847 text messages, 63 missed calls, and the distinct sensation that my life had become a case study in how to weaponize a dinner party. My phone had been buzzing so consistently throughout the night that I'd eventually turned it off around 2 a.m., but apparently the internet doesn't sleep when there's a scandal to dissect. And oh boy, was there a scandal to dissect. Jennifer and Sarah's live streams had been viewed over 50,000 times by Sunrise, which meant that somewhere between the salad course and Harper's dramatic exit, my marital implosion had gone viral in that specific way that suburban drama always does. Fast, messy, and with more commentary than a sports broadcast. I made coffee, because what else are you supposed to do when your marriage ends and the entire town knows about it? And scrolled through the messages with the kind of morbid fascination usually reserved for watching car crashes or reading your own Yelp reviews. Margaret had texted 17 times, each message more breathless than the last, oscillating between, "I can't believe this happened," and "I always knew something was off about Tessa." Richard from work had sent a message that just said, "Dude," followed by 5 fire emojis and a link to his Facebook post about the dinner party, which had 342 shares and counting. My college buddy Mike had texted, "That was the most legendary thing I've ever witnessed. You're buying drinks for the rest of your life. Also, you okay?" At least someone asked if I was okay. I wasn't okay, for the record, but I wasn't not okay either. I existed in this weird liminal space between vindicated and devastated, between satisfied that justice had been served and sad that my 17-year marriage had ended at a catered dinner party in front of an audience that was currently turning it into content. But I'd chosen this. I'd orchestrated this. And if I was going to feel feelings about it, I'd do that later, probably around 3 a.m. for the next several months when these things traditionally ambush you. Tessa had apparently left at some point during the night. I'd fallen asleep on the couch around midnight after answering the same questions from concerned friends approximately 40 times, and when I checked the bedroom, half her closet was empty. Not all of it, just the essential half, which meant she'd grabbed what she needed for immediate survival and fled like someone evacuating a natural disaster. Her toiletries were gone from the bathroom. Her laptop was missing from the office. The divorce books she'd hidden under her side of the bed. Yeah, I'd found those weeks ago, were also gone, which suggested she'd been planning her exit strategy even before the dinner party forced her hand. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter, because of course she had. It was written on our fancy letterhead stationery, the kind we'd bought for thank you notes and never used, because who actually writes thank you notes anymore? Logan. It started, which was already not a great sign because she usually called me babe or honey, and using my actual name suggested she'd shifted into lawyer mode. "I need space to process everything. I'm staying with Jennifer temporarily. We need to talk, but not yet. I'm sorry you found out this way. I never meant to hurt you." The note was short, clinical, and completely devoid of actual accountability. She was sorry I found out this way. Not sorry for the affair itself. Not sorry for 14 months of lies. Just sorry that her carefully constructed deception had been demolished at a dinner party with witnesses and photographic evidence. I crumpled the note and threw it in the trash, which felt appropriately symbolic even if it accomplished nothing practical. Then I called my lawyer, Stan Morrison, who I'd hired 2 weeks ago when I'd first confirmed the affair and started planning for exactly this scenario. Stan was old school, the kind of divorce attorney who'd seen everything twice and was impressed by nothing, which made him perfect for handling situations that involved spreadsheets, security camera footage, and public humiliation as a legal strategy. "I saw the videos," Stan said when he answered, which apparently was how we were starting this conversation. "Your dinner party made it to my daughter's TikTok feed. She's 16. You've achieved cross-generational virality. Congratulations, I think." He sounded amused, which was better than judgmental. "But more importantly, you've documented everything perfectly. The affair, the financial deception, the use of marital assets for extramarital activities. It's a divorce lawyer's dream. We can move forward whenever you're ready. I'm ready, I said, surprising myself with how true that was. I'd been ready since Thursday at the beach house. Maybe I'd been ready since the first time Tessa lied about where she was going, back before I knew it was a lie, but some part of me suspected anyway. File the papers. Let's get this over with. Within 48 hours, the entire town knew about the beach house scandal, which was apparently what people were calling it now, like it was a political controversy or a reality TV episode. Brandon's real estate career tanked faster than the Titanic. Harper's one-star review had been followed by an avalanche of people who suddenly remembered unprofessional behavior or questionable ethics, and his brokerage had quietly removed him from their website by Tuesday. His LinkedIn profile went dormant. His for-sale signs started disappearing from yards. The guy had gone from marginally successful real estate agent to social pariah in under 72 hours, which might be a record. Tessa moved out officially by the end of the week, technically for space, practically for survival, because staying in our house after what happened would have required a level of shamelessness even she couldn't muster. She came by when I was at work, packed the rest of her things, and left her key on the counter next to another note that I didn't read because honestly, what else was there to say? Our marriage was over. The divorce papers were filed. Her lawyer had already contacted Stan with a list of demands that suggested she thought she deserved something other than exactly nothing, but Stan had laughed and said we'd be fine. Downtown loft that she'd apparently been eyeing for months. Silver lining to marital collapse, I guess. And threw herself into her work with the kind of intensity that suggested architecture was cheaper than therapy and more productive than day drinking. We texted occasionally, updates on our respective divorce proceedings, dark jokes about starting a support group for people whose spouses had terrible judgment and worse timing. She got her settlement, the house, Brandon's half of their savings, and probably his dignity, though that wasn't explicitly listed in the legal documents. I got my freedom, my beach house, and the satisfaction of knowing that Tessa would be explaining this disaster to every future partner for the rest of her life. I took a week off work, which Stan recommended and my boss enthusiastically approved after the dinner party videos made their way through the office. I spent it cleaning house, literally, throwing away everything that reminded me of Tessa, and figuratively, setting up new bank accounts and changing passwords, and doing all the administrative work that comes with disentangling a 17-year marriage. It was tedious. It was necessary. And somewhere around day 4, when I was boxing up wedding photos and wondering what you're supposed to do with physical evidence of promises people break, I realized something. I felt lighter. Not happy, not yet, but lighter. Like I'd been carrying weight I didn't know I was carrying, and someone had finally taken it off my shoulders. Revenge hadn't felt bitter. It felt balanced, like interest finally collected on a debt that had been accumulating compound penalties for over a year. Justice with a side of public humiliation and legally binding consequences. It felt, weirdly enough, like peace. Months later, I still visit the beach house on Thursdays, which probably sounds like I'm stuck in some kind of trauma loop, returning to the scene of the crime like a detective who can't let go of a cold case. But here's the thing. It's my damn beach house. I paid for it, and I'll be damned if I let Tessa and Brandon's poor life choices ruin my favorite piece of real estate. So yeah, every Thursday around 3 p.m., I drive out there with my laptop, a good book, and zero emotional baggage about what used to happen in that living room. I had the sectional professionally cleaned, twice, and honestly, it's fine now. Everything's fine. I'm fine. This is what fine looks like, and it involves reclaiming your property from the ghosts of infidelity past. The beach house has a different energy now, which sounds like something a yoga instructor would say, but it's true. No more secrets lurking in the corners. No more lies embedded in the foundation like toxic mold. Just ocean, sunlight, and the kind of silence that doesn't sting anymore. It's the good kind of quiet, the kind where you can actually hear yourself think instead of wondering what your spouse is really doing when she says she's at a wine and design class. I sit on the deck, the one I built myself 3 summers ago, and watch the waves do their thing, and sometimes I think about how water just keeps moving forward no matter what. And maybe that's not a bad philosophy for post-divorce life. Harper and I grab coffee sometimes, which started as a practical thing, coordinating our divorce proceedings, sharing lawyer recommendations, Comparing notes on how to divide assets when your spouse has been systematically lying to you for over a year, but evolved into something that looks suspiciously like friendship. We're two people who've seen the worst and decided to laugh anyway. Because what else are you going to do? Cry forever? That's boring and expensive if you factor in the therapy costs. So instead, we meet at our usual cafe, the aggressively hipster one where we first plotted our revenge, and we trade stories about our ex's continued disasters like we're swapping baseball cards. Last week, Harper told me Brandon had moved to Arizona to start fresh, which is code for run away from the consequences of your actions and hope nobody in Phoenix has internet access. Tessa, according to the neighborhood gossip network that Margaret runs with the efficiency of her intelligence agency, is dating someone she met on a divorce singles app, which suggests she's learned absolutely nothing from this experience and is probably going to cheat on him too within 14 months. I told Harper this, and she nearly spit out her latte laughing. Do you regret anything? Harper asked me once during one of these coffee sessions. It was a random Tuesday afternoon, and she'd just finished telling me about a beach house project she'd landed, a legitimate one this time, with clients who weren't using the property for extramarital activities. She was looking at me with those intelligent eyes that had probably measured 1,000 structural problems and found solutions for all of them, and I could tell she was genuinely curious. Only not installing better cameras sooner, I said without missing a beat. Could have saved myself about 12 months of oblivious husband syndrome. Also, maybe I regret not serving better wine at the dinner party. We went mid-range when we probably should have splurged for the good stuff if we were going to blow up 2 marriages in front of an audience. Harper laughed until the barista, a kid with a man bun and opinions about sustainable coffee farming, gave us that look that service industry workers give customers who are clearly having too much fun. We didn't care. We'd earned our laughter through suffering and good documentation practices. We'd survived betrayal and come out the other side with our sense of humor intact, which is more than most people can say. I learned something in all this, somewhere between discovering the affair and watching it implode at a dinner party that will probably be discussed in our neighborhood for the next decade. Love is like architecture. Without integrity, it collapses. You can have the most beautiful design, the most expensive materials, the best location, but if the foundation is compromised, if the structural elements are weak, if someone's cutting corners and lying about load-bearing walls, the whole thing comes down eventually. Tessa and I built something that looked solid from the outside, but was rotting from the inside. And maybe that was both our faults. Or maybe it was just hers. Or maybe it doesn't matter anymore, because the building's condemned and we've both moved on. Harper gets this in a way most people don't, probably because she literally is an architect and understands structural failure on both a professional and personal level. Sometimes I think about what she said that day at the beach house. I think I've found the crack in the foundation, and I realize she wasn't just talking about Brandon's affair. She was talking about what happens when you build a life on lies, when you ignore the warning signs, when you trust the wrong contractor with your most important project. These days, I'm rebuilding. New foundation, better materials, no shortcuts. I'm working with an architect who specializes in beach houses and also happens to understand betrayal, which turns out to be a useful combination. We're taking it slow, starting with friendship and coffee and shared dark humor about our ex's continued inability to function like decent humans. Maybe it becomes something more eventually. Maybe it doesn't. Either way, I'm good. Because here's what I know now. Sometimes the best way to rebuild your life is with someone who understands exactly how it fell apart. Someone who's been through the same structural collapse and came out the other side still standing. Someone who knows that love without integrity is just an expensive mistake waiting to happen. And sometimes, just sometimes, the best revenge is building something better with the architect of your ex's mistakes. The Thursday afternoon sun hits the beach house just right these days, and I'm finally enjoying it the way I always meant to. No secrets, no lies, just me, my property, and the future I'm building one honest Thursday at a time.